Hi, I'm Shannon Lambert, Smile Train's Vice President and Regional Director for the Americas and Europe. I'm joined today by someone I've had the pleasure of working with for the past few years, Gareth Davies. Welcome, Gareth.
Hello.
Gareth is currently the Executive Director of the European Cleft Organization and has held a variety of roles in different cleft-focused organizations over the years. Definitely stick around because after our conversation, he's promised to share some of his learnings from a lifetime spent empowering the cleft community. So you've held many positions at different cleft-focused organizations. Would you mind sharing which organizations those were and walk us through the different positions you've held?
Sure. I started working for the Cleft Lip and Palate Association, CLAPA for short. And at that time, the focus was mainly on supporting families and babies. And so having come from a different perspective, being born with the cleft, not having a child with the cleft, we both sides, the people I was supporting and myself, we had to actually learn from each other. And for the first time in my life, I realized that my parents must have had quite a time as well. So it was the first year, there was certainly a big learning curve. I thought I knew everything about clefts, but no, I only knew one side of it. So we started moving on from early cleft care with the new families to actually thinking about how we can support children and how we can actually make sure that they build their self-confidence and they can stand tall with their heads held high. What can we do? So we started developing activities and in particular activity camps, go away for a couple of weeks, organize lots of sporting activities and drama as well, and music. Music was especially effective. And we found that the kids, we weren't doing anything in the way of therapy or structured support. We were just giving them a fun time. And the most important thing for them was actually at the end of the day when they returned to their dormitories, you hear them talking amongst themselves about their own experiences and how they were getting on at school and things. And that was the real therapy, as it were. It was coming from them. It was all self-help. So that was really good to hear. In time, we started developing things for adults with clefts as well. We set up an adult clapper. You have a cleft for life, and people still go on after all their surgeries, and they have challenges. They might have challenges with confidence in the workplace and all kinds of things. So there is definitely a need for later support as well, and people are very shy to look for it, but it needs to be provided. In my final years at Clapper, I started linking up with other support charities around Europe. I did a few mission trips, and I was astounded to see that in Europe, which is relatively small, you can go 1,000 miles, and you go from one country where all the cleft care was provided, and people would have all the support, to another country where a child was left in an orphanage, abandoned, all within 2 hours on a plane, I guess. So relatively small, and I was of course aware of global support charities for developing world all over the world, but there was no real coordinated support within Europe itself. So I set up an organization called the European Cleft Organization, which specializes in bringing people together in terms of knowledge, bringing know-how from one country to another, exchanges, linking up with patient support groups, making sure that when a child is born, the parents and the local practitioners know where to direct the child. So all very nitty-gritty stuff, and we actually just started doing some online training this week in Spain. Another type of activity. We're ensuring that despite all the problems we've got with travel, we're still carrying on with the work that's so necessary.
So much experience, Gareth. It's really nice to learn more about your history with organizations such as CLAPA. As you know, Smile Train is also a partner with them, and it's really great just to hear more about that.
Yeah, there was just a couple of points that I missed off. There was another organization that I've recently been working with called Face Equality International, and I know that Smile Train is a founding member as well, and they're actually going one step further. They're looking more at how we integrate people in society. If you look different, you don't have to be treated differently. So that's a big sort of global campaigning organization, which we are joining forces with different organizations that have support for different types of physical conditions. So that's another much broader way of trying to fix the world rather than fix the individual.
That's great. Thank you for expanding on that. Something I know people would love to learn more about are your learnings from a lifetime spent empowering the Cleft community. Would you mind sharing some more with us?
Sure, I've got a few short slides that I can share with you, which I've been putting together really over the past few weeks. Everyone looks at how you can fix the individual to fit in with the world, but in fact, what needs to happen? I like to turn the question upside down. What needs to happen in the world for someone with a cleft to thrive? What needs to happen for them to get on and attain their full potential? This rather complex slide is just a list of areas that we all rely on, and we're starting with the family and the individuals at the top, and then we're going through the health areas that we need support from. But then there's the whole educational platform, the schools, the teachers, which is so important. They need to be aware and supported to help families and children as well. And indeed, I'll be saying a little bit more about this in due course. And finally, you've got society, you've got the much wider equal opportunities, people being able to walk into a job, even though they might look a little different, they're not going to be unfavored at interview stage. So that's a much broader thing, and that's more sort of campaigning, changing government roles and that kind of thing. That's much more complex. But we are, with Face Equality International, we are beginning to knock on those doors and have some make some differences. And my organization is called European Cleft Organization, ECO, but sometimes I actually change the acronym to Equal Cleft Opportunities because I actually think it's more relevant. So back to the role of the family. I think the key here is the family will want to support their children. They really will want the best, but they don't always have the skills and the knowledge to do that. If you have a child born with anything that's different to regular, then you're going to need your own help and support to get through that. And it's how the parents deal with the child with the cleft that's going to have such a long-term knock-on effect on how the child deals with it. And health professionals really need to go the extra mile and ensure that families really do have the extra support, and they have the information and advice, and how to identify any early warning signs of perhaps being teased or bullied or something at school, and actually knowing what to do with that. And we've got some programs at the moment when we're working more with families in the home to ensure that they can pick up on those issues that really can be dealt with quite simply if there's some basic instruction given. The Cleft team, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the role of the Cleft team. It's where you get your cleft bits, basically. Of course, the care and expertise has to be based on evidence and really thought through science and protocols. But I think the key message in this slide really is about involving the families and the young people themselves in the decision making, and actually explaining things in a way that really can be understood, so that if a decision has to be made, the family and the child are really empowered. They know whether to say yes or no. And I know from my own experience growing up that I was given an option for an operation, and I actually said no point blank, and they were quite surprised. But there again, it's probably me just being a little bit different. But yeah, I wasn't given a choice. I had to stand up and say no. And also, Cleft team, they need to be aware that sometimes even appointment times aren't convenient if you're traveling a long way. So it's actually thinking of what's going to work best for the family, and how can we get people who are perhaps less able to use transport, how they're going to get to the clinics as well. And they need to provide an encouraging, positive sense of purpose. We are doing this so that your child will thrive. And I've seen some excellent work in other parts of the world, in Asia actually, where the Cleft team really helps the children get on and gives them support around interviews for jobs and things like that, which is marvelous. So this is when a child might not be given opportunities. This is a quote from one of the children at one of our camps. I never felt like I had a choice about any of my surgeries. I had a jaw distraction, which is a huge operation, when what I really wanted was to get rid of my lip scar, which would have been quite a minor operation. So that's really, really key to actually involve them in the decisions that are being made. I think things are improving, but there's still a long way to go. And teachers, yeah, I just point out here, this picture here is my son William, who then was, I think, 8. He's now nearly 30, so it was a while back. So the role of teachers is absolutely crucial. And they might have their own stereotypical opinions of a child with a cleft. They might believe that they won't achieve as well. The young people themselves may have low expectations, and this could affect class participation. I think teachers, most of all, they're not going to know about clefts unless you tell them. So I'm not talking about saying my child's got a cleft, wrap them in blankets and look after them. It's just common sense, like my child's got a cleft. There may be some issues around class participation. There may be some issues around hearing. They will be missing some class school time because of hospital appointments. We're doing some work at the moment around information leaflets for parents that they can give to teachers, so teachers become observers. I mean, they spend an awful lot of time with our children, so I think they're in a brilliant place to actually look out for any difficult signs that might appear that might need attention. And now we're getting on to the much bigger picture now, the whole of society, social inclusion, stigma. Anyone that has stigma applied to them will not have equal opportunities. They will not be socially accepted. And the contrary to that is, if you make things more visible, people will be less frightened of them and they won't be stigmatized. And it's a lot of work we're doing at the moment with Face Equality International, is actually talking how we can get people who look different into the media, reading the news, this kind of stuff, make things familiar, and then people won't be scared of it. I mean, people stare and point, not because they want to be rude, it's usually because they just don't know enough about it and they really want to understand. So we have to help them understand. And this is a great thing about visibility. It's about being the same because you're different. At one of the camps that we did with young people at Clapper, we had a little boy called Stacey, and he wrote a poem afterwards, and I'll just read it to you. It said, he said, "I went to camp with Clapper. It was just by the sea. It's called the Ranch, which rhymes with branch, and I was just in time for tea. I met lots of people there. They all looked just like me. At last I wasn't different, so I could just be me." And that's just familiarity. If people are familiar with what you look like, no matter what you look like, then the world will be a better place. I think we just need to, we're seeing it in other sectors of society. If you normalize things by making them familiar, then there's not going to be stigma. So this is just, I mean, I think people will be familiar with this. It's the labeling of human difference, such as the cleft. It's stereotyping all people with clefts are ABC. Separating those labels, so it's them and us. That's such a typical part of stigma. And you lose your status, and there's discrimination against those being labeled. So that's just like a dictionary definition. But I think a lot of us born with clefts will actually, all those will ring true at some point in their lives. And I'm sure you're familiar with this next slide. I follow straight on from stigma, because if you're rich and famous and you're a famous actor like Joaquin Phoenix, and you're interviewed on live television by, in this case, a celebrity host, Wendy Williams, and they make an expression like that, you were born with one of these, it's a sorry state of affairs. And I'm glad to say most of the world is not like that, but there's a long way to go. I certainly remember people in my school days doing that to me, and it goes really deep still. So there's an awful long way to go. Stigma, I think it's less, certainly in a lot of countries than it used to be, but there's a long way to go, and that slide just shows it. So I suppose my take-home message is, it's not about the cleft team. The cleft team is really important, but isn't patient satisfaction the ultimate validation of the quality of cleft care? That's what someone said to me. Well, if the person with the cleft is happy, that means the cleft team's got it all right. Actually, the cleft team might have got it right, and they might have got it wrong, but there's so much more important than just the actual immediate cleft care. It's the whole environment that's really key to this. And if things go wrong, we can't look at the Cleft team. It's actually society. And we all have a part to play in informing others, our neighbours, the media, whatever, rising to the occasion, like with the story with Wendy Williams and Joaquin Phoenix. There was a big fuss made, and that helps, using the opportunities. So I'll leave you with that message, and thank you very much. And these two little babies, both with bilateral cleft twins, were born in Romania a few years ago. They're doing fine. They're about 7 now. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Gareth, for lending your insights from your wealth of experience working in the cleft community. Every time we're together, I learn something new. And you touched on so many important topics, from patient-centered care to equal opportunities, social inclusion, and support systems. And I especially loved and appreciated the quotes from the patients, which lends a perfect insight and a very important insight into the conversation. And Stacey's poem was just the sweetest. And as you so clearly noted, there's still tons of work to be done in the cleft space, but I'm so very thankful knowing that you are helping lead and shape these efforts. Thank you, Gareth. And for anyone who would like to learn more about Gareth or the European Cleft Organization, or have any questions for him, you can find his bio on the conference platform and reach out to him directly from there. Thanks everyone for joining. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live Q&A portion of our session. In case some of you are just joining us, I'm Shannon Lambert, Vice President and Regional Director for the Americas and Europe at SmileTrain. And I'm joined by my friend Gareth Davies, the Executive Director of the European Cleft Organization. Gareth just shared a lot about his experience and background working in cleft care. If you have a question for Gareth, please enter it into the chat. Gareth, we already have quite a few coming in for you as expected through our private chat channels. So we'll see how many we can get through in the allotted time. So first and foremost, people would love to know what first inspired you to work in the NGO space.
How far shall I go back? I guess it goes back to when I was at school. I always enjoyed doing things a little bit different to others. I liked fixing things. That's the thing I always enjoyed doing. But after I left school, went to university, I got really interested in Eastern Europe as a place. The political situation there was really interesting at the time. And I managed to get a scholarship to study in Poland, and I was there for 2 or 3 years. I got really involved with the political situation, and there was a lot of upheaval with the communist system as it was then. Human rights was a big thing. And after I'd been through that experience, I actually started working for 2 or 3 human rights organizations. So I guess I was kind of speaking up for people who had no voice. And after 2 or 3 years of doing that, I ended up working for another rights issue area, which was homelessness. I was working with young people who were on the streets in a completely different capacity, working for a homelessness charity. And again, I was speaking on behalf of those who had no voice. And some years later, I saw a job advertised in a newspaper for the first executive director of the Cleft Lip and Palate Association in the UK, Clapper. And I thought I'd apply, and I got the job. So I think that was, again, the issue of speaking up for those who don't normally have a platform. And that's what I'm still doing now.
Very cool, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Might you be able to expand a little bit more on some of the projects that the European Cleft Organization has been carrying out? Some more specifics on those?
Yeah, sure. And we're very grateful for SmileTrain's support as well. We have an ongoing project which is teaching nurses in early cleft care. I mean, one of the things that we learned from Bulgaria in particular, going back some years, was that children were being put in orphanages, not because there wasn't any cleft care available, but they were actually not being sent to the right place for information for diagnosis after birth. And so we felt it was very, very important to actually ensure that frontline health professionals, nurses, midwives, are able to give the right advice at the right time to ensure those children get their surgeries, get their and their families get the support that they need. So currently we're running some nurse training that we developed actually originally in Bulgaria. We're doing some online stuff thanks to the COVID pandemic. At the moment, we're doing it online now, but it's working. It's having really good feedback. On another level, we're looking at how we can train parents to support other parents, because particularly in countries where there's very little in the way of resources, if we can ensure that parents are given some training to support other parents, it really helps the Cleft team. It actually enables the Cleft team to get into discussion with families on more of a one-to-one level, and with that crucial training around listening skills. And parents actually themselves are very good in the way of they've traveled the same journey, and so they can be very effective helpers if they have the right skills. That's just a couple of projects we're working on at the moment.
That's great. And piggybacking off of what you were saying about the work you've been doing in Bulgaria, there's been such a lack of awareness amongst medical professionals in knowing how to properly care for a child with a cleft. We have a question, the spinoff of that, from Michelle. She's asking if you have any suggestions for helping a teen care for a child in a non-compliant setting. So not the cleft team, but maybe the parents, the home life. If you have any suggestions for teams for dealing with that.
Non-compliant session. I think I would always say that the team needs to include the family and the child as part of the team. So if the team should be open to discussing all the decisions around surgery with the whole family, with the child included. I'm guessing if a child doesn't want surgery and the parents do, and the clinicians do, I think the child should have that space to say why they don't want the surgery at this particular time, or why they're having an issue with the treatment. And I think it's very important to give, no matter what age. Obviously not at infancy, but even as young as 7, 8, 9, whatever. I think the child really just needs to having a voice to express themselves. I don't quite know what the question was, but I hope I've made some good points.
Michelle, let us know if there's more that Gareth can expand on that. You also, in our earlier chat, you mentioned the disparities of care across Europe. What are some of the largest gaps in cleft care found in Europe, and how does your organization help connect cleft-affected individuals to cleft teams and find that care that they need?
Well, we have a huge database called the Cleft Gateway, which we can we're building on it all the time. In fact, now we're moving into multi-language, so someone types the word cleft in their own language, and they will actually end up on a site in their language, giving them the local support and hospitals that can provide treatment. I think the biggest gaps really are around in Europe are actually around initial information after diagnosis. So I can't think of a single country in Europe where there's no cleft care. Cleft care exists, it certainly does, but there's a huge gap. I call them frontline health professionals. So the people who are normally around when a baby's born, so they can be nurses, midwives, obstetricians, pediatricians, that it's that front level of care is actually not always informed about clefts and where to refer to. And I think that's probably the biggest impact we've made in the country we're working, is actually around educating those frontline health professionals. Of course, we do work with cleft teams, and we organize exchanges for know-how, team personnel. But I still think the biggest gap in some of the countries we're working in is that frontline, the frontline health professionals. They just don't have the knowledge and the understanding of care pathways to be able to do a service to the families and the babies.
Sure. And I appreciate you mentioning the gateway as well. I know we have a lot of people attending the session are from the US, so this would be similar to the ACPA website where you can find the team listing. So that's a really great resource that the European Cleft Organization is providing to families in Europe. Thank you for mentioning that.
One of the difficulties we have, of course, in Europe is there's at least 22 official languages in Europe, and there's probably countless more that are not officials. So actually reaching people in their own homes, you really do have to have a multilingual facility website, which is what we're working on at the moment.
And I'm sure Cleft standards too, here in the US, the ACPA, helps the teams that are listed on there meet a certain standard of cleft care, but I can imagine that in Europe, that would be a lot different. You're dealing with lots of countries, as you mentioned, which have different protocols for doing things. Is that something that you have been working in or have experienced with?
Sure, yeah, it was 2016. We actually launched some guidelines in early cleft care. Using again our experience in Bulgaria, we teamed up with the European Committee for Standardization in Brussels, and we worked with 16 countries to put together some guidelines in early cleft care, which it took a while to get agreement, as you can imagine. People tend to focus on the differences rather than the togetherness. But in the end, and we made some compromises too, but we ended up with a document that's now on our website, which I think is a good baseline of cleft care that could be applied anywhere in the world. And it goes from early care right through to what you need to provide if you're a cleft team in the way of resource. So yeah, no, we were excited about that. I mean, I always say it's all very well having guidelines, it's actually making sure they're implemented, which you can never stop. We'll be working at this for a very long time.
Right, and ensuring the teams that are trying to meet those guidelines have the resources available to them in order to do so is a whole other story too.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you so much for that. And as some of you may or may not know, Smile Train does have programs in Europe. They're very small at the moment. We are trying to grow them. We hired our first program manager based out of Europe earlier this year. And she's also working very closely with Gareth and different projects around the continent. And we're excited to see where it goes. As you said, there's so much work still to be done. I think we're running out of time, but thank everyone so much for being here. Gareth, thank you so much for sharing your story and experience with all of us. And thanks for stopping by our talk. I hope you all enjoy the rest of CleftCon. Take care.
Okay, thank you.